All right, what is up, everybody? This was so popular for the Sport Essentials collection that we decided that everybody kind of unanimously decided that we needed to have a league edition. And this is going to be different, of course, because a lot of the time balls that are better on sport conditions aren't as effective on aren't as effective on league patterns, but it's not that they're not necessarily effective, because there's a lot of people that use like IQ tours and gems, DNAs, clones, whatever else, stuff that's really good on sport, look good on league conditions too. It's just generally speaking, there are better options for league where you have a little bit more room on the lane. You have more miss room, so you can typically go for more dynamic ball reactions than you can on sport conditions. Sport conditions, you want control. House conditions, you want to abuse the available area and you want to throw pins around. And the majority of the time, that means that stuff like a virtual energy blackout that may not, or journey that may not be as good on sport conditions should be a whole lot better on league conditions, because you have more forgiveness, you have more to work with. You can just, thank you. We have crotch rockets that zoom up and down anyway, so we're going to start into ranking these, and what I'm going to do differently, since I haven't done one of these before, I'm going to start with just the balls that are available in the catalog right now. So the current stuff, I'm going to go through those first, and then if we have time at the end, I'm going to take requests. So stuff like an Infinite Physics, Idle Cosmos, Reality Check, Wolverine Dark Moss, Fate that just got discontinued, Phase 5 that just got discontinued, Zen U, whatever else. We will talk, we will do requests and talk about other balls at the end of this. But for right now, we're going to talk about what's actually currently in the line right now. So, and these are all alphabetical. So we're not going to start in order of, because IQ Tour has been in the line for over a decade. The High Road just turned 15, I think, the other day, or it's coming up here in a day or two. I don't know. Can't remember. The High Road's 15 though, so it's still in the line. So we're going to talk about it. Yeah, I forgot to. No, did I forget to save? Because I was going to. Let me see. So I think I saved a screenshot of what the Sport Essentials were. I really hope I did. Nope. Wrong one. Oh, yeah, that's Tier Maker. There we go. Did I save a screenshot? No, I did not. Well, I'm going to pull up that stream really quick and see where I ranked all this stuff, because I'm so well prepared here. I'll take a screenshot. Yeah. I'll take a screenshot of where everything is at and pop that up and see what we'll see what the differences are between, not that one, Tier Maker, there we go. There's the right folder. Design, overlay, upload picture. You have to hang with me. I'm a guy. I can't talk and do stuff at the same time. It just doesn't work that way. So, all right. So here's what we were looking at. Here was my final rankings for the Sport Essentials. So you're going to see, again, November 17th, 15 yesterday. Cool. So you're going to notice that in the S tier, or the best stuff on sport, is a Phase 2, is a Reality, Pitch Black, Summit, Eternity Pie, Clone, Exotic Gem, and even down into the A's, Magic, DNA, Tour Dynamics. Absolute's going to be fairly high on both. Something like an Eternity is going to be high on both. The Summit's going to be high on both. But other stuff that you might see down here towards the end, such as the Duo, Journey, High Road, TNT Infused, Virtual Energy Blackout, that stuff is going to be higher on the League Essentials list than it is going to be. The TNT is just going to be D-list, so we're going to skip ahead, and I'm going to put that there right now. I'm just going to put that where it belongs. So, this is just where this ball belongs. So we'll just start with that. How about that? So so Absolute, it was in A tier. Let me see if I can let me see if I can adjust this. Nope, that's just going to be an overlay. It's just an overlay. So that's a problem. So we'll just go ahead and hide that and go back to normal. I'll actually open it here in the sidebar so that I can kind of reference it myself. So the Absolute was middle of the pack in A tier on the Sport Essentials, because I think the Absolute, yeah, spoiler alert, we're just going to skip ahead. The TNT is bad on everything. Sorry. Unless you're a two-hander that wants a pitch black that hooks a little bit more, is a little bit more dynamic. Unless you want something to actually puke and give up, then it's your ball. But yeah, it's just not good. The Absolute was middle of the pack on the A tier for Sport Essentials, because it's not it's a cleaner, sharper ball, but because it's got a weaker cover on it, it's not quite as sensitive. It's sensitive based on it's weaker and more dynamic, so it's not going to hook as much in the oil. It's going to hook more on friction, but that makes it a good dirt ball. It makes it a good heavy stages of transition ball when you get deep and you need the ball to be clean and then sharp to recover from the angle, but still be weak enough to be somewhat controllable. And so I think that that's the good thing for the Absolute. It loves covering boards. It takes a lot of friction to kick it out of play. And once you get the lanes transitioned on sport patterns, the Absolute comes into play. Now, if you put a little surface on the Absolute, or you just have higher friction lanes on a regular wide open house shot pattern, I think the Absolute borders on A to S tier. I don't think it's quite, now most people won't have it as quite a fresh ball. It's a little too clean and sharp to be a dead fresh, even on a league shot, unless you're bowling on like AMF HPLs or 20-year-old Anvilane or something like that. So unless you just have super dirty conditions or a whole lot of friction, generally when house shots are fresh, especially on ones that are like super walls or super cliffs, it can be a little too cliffy for the Absolute. But again, once you get just a little bit of transition on the lanes, break them down a little bit, this ball is going to be really good. And so I think it does deserve an A tier. A tier, again, borderline S tier. It might, by the time we get through this, we're going to rearrange some stuff. And so the Absolute might be a low end S tier ball by the time we get through this. But we're going to have a lot of stuff. I mean, league conditions, again, we're going to have a lot of stuff in S and A tier. So it's going to be kind of tricky to kick some of this stuff down to like B, C, D, because nothing is really TNT level. But it's going to be, we're going to have a lot of stuff up near the top, because a lot of this stuff is just going to look good on house conditions. And again, I made the distinction that we're going to some balls may be good on house, but some may be just better. And so some of these that end up in B or C tier, it won't necessarily be because they're just not effective. It's just they're not as effective as the other stuff. Whoops, that one. I don't see how the absolute isn't mid to upper A tier at worst. Fast-ish asim with surprising stability for how clean it is and never locks up on friction. That's the other thing, is sometimes marketing stuff sucks and is stupid, but they made a point of saying that the new Sentinel core in the absolute is single density. And so while it is asymmetric, it doesn't have like a higher density flip block on the bottom or something. And so it's still you still get the asymmetric torque, but you get more of a symmetric response overall. So it doesn't jerk stop, it doesn't stand up, it gives you the torque without giving you the locking up that most ASIMs do. And that's one of those marketing things that I'm like, okay, well, it's selling point, but it's actually, I've found it to be correct. I think James would think it's correct. I think a lot of people that have thrown it would agree. It's bordering, it's somewhere in between asymmetric and symmetric. So it blends wet dry on the back ends better than symmetrics, or better than asymmetrics, but it's faster. It has more torque than symmetrics. Absolute in the transition for me is super gross. Shot my highest sanctioned series with it 2 weeks ago. Had it since April. Knocked reactive gloss off. Yeah, Summit on fresh is also pretty gross. Summit on fresh, especially on the left side when you can continue to use it the entire night. I think that on the right side, you will get into enough transition to where it's just going to make it too early and slow. So I think you would have to eventually get out of the Summit. But on the left side, when it's virtually fresh the entire night, it's a cheat code. More on that in a minute. Yeah, so good on mid to late block, later situations. I'll save this until we're not too far away from the hustle. So I'm going to pin this comment and I'll come back to it. All right, next ball on the list, the clone. The clone is also surprisingly good because it's it's very good on sport conditions and house conditions because it splits that gap. It's almost like the clone almost acts like a solid absolute, realistically. It's not quite as forward-ish. It's not quite as directional as the absolute. The clone does want to pick up and continue, but it does act with a little bit of shine on it. It acts like just a little bit stronger earlier in absolute, and with surface on it, it's really blendy. It's really controllable. I'm going to go on ahead and put it in B tier for right now, just because it is a little bit on the slower side, and because I think that some other stuff like the virtual energy blackout is a league cheat code. Spoiler alert, the blackout's going to be an S tier because it's just ridiculous, just absolutely stupid. The clone, I think, is going to end up at the top of B tier because it's going to be a lot more effective when control is a lot more necessary, and it's not bad on house conditions. I've used mine really successfully on house conditions several times. It's just because of it being slower, there are other things that are going to be better. In the same situation you would use a clone in, you could be using, again, a Summit, even though the cover's a little stronger. It's a little earlier, it's a little smoother than the clone, but it's a little bit more effective because it has a little bit more traction. So yeah, after one game, Summit goes back in the bag and the absolute comes out. Yeah. So the clone, I think, is going to stay a high B tier, if not low A tier by the time we get done with it. Again, very, very good ball in general. Not a UFO alert, absolutely not, but I'm really happy with what it did end up being. So just good ball all the way around. Really versatile depending on what surface it's at too. So really, really solid ball. Better choices most of the time on house though. Looking at the DNA, this is a very tricky one because I think I got a different DNA than everybody else got. I've definitely got a different one than James got. His just refuses to get deeper than third arrow. Just refuses. Toddler and Walmart stuff wouldn't happen. Mine looks amazing at third arrow. And I'll talk about this in a minute with the journey. But the journey I just talked about on the stream that we just got off of, I had hoped, because it was kind of tumbly, it's cleaner and sharper, but still kind of tumbly like a Summit, I had hoped that it was going to be a good ball down from the Summit. Absolutely not. It's just too clean and sharp. The DNA is actually the ball that I wanted, because it does kind of, it's cleaner up front, it's sharper down lane, but it still has that kind of summit tumble. So as soon as I do need to get in a little bit, if that ever happens on the left side, or in the case of it, if it just, things are a little bit, if the summit just is a little too slow one night, or there's some over under by the ditch that I wanted, there's the wet dry line between like 5 and 6 board that I want to get away from. The DNA is a very similar shape that is cleaner, is sharper, still tumbly. I actually have the DNA as kind of a ball down, even though it's supposed to, it's got a massive asymmetric core in it. Supposedly has a stronger cover than the Summit 2, not by a whole lot, but it is there. The DNA is just nasty. I mean, it's just super, super good. I think I'm going to have to, though, for most people, it's good on sport patterns. I'm going to go ahead and put it in C tier for right now. I think there's just, for the vast majority of people on the majority of house shots that are lower volume, higher friction, whatever else, it's just too much ball, not versatile enough left to right. So I think that, unfortunately, if it was me, I would put it in A tier right behind the Absolute. But I think for most people in general, the DNA is a much better sport ball than a house shot ball. And if you can use it on house, it's going to be in the same situation as James. You know, he averaged 260 with it the first game, but then he always had to put it. It gave him a game, and it was just easier for him to. It was just easier for him to throw something else that he could continue to move left with, so that he didn't have to, okay, we're going to throw this ball, we're going to get our free 260, and then have to make a ball change and make a zone change and whatever else, when he can also shoot 250 or 260 with another ball that he can just kind of keep moving left with. So it didn't really make sense. It didn't really make a whole lot of sense for him. The DNA I might move up that up to low B tier, but for right now, that's where it's going to be. The Duo is another one here that I haven't gotten along with. It looks pretty good for Angel. It looks good for most people, especially on the right side, because there's more, again, there's more friction in the track on the right side, front to back. Yeah, DNA is just as bad as the TNT, if not worse. And I imagine that that's going to be most people's experience. And so the Eternity for me is absolute, complete, unmitigated dog shit. One of my personal bottom 5 balls, worst 5 balls of all time, but it's amazing for literally everybody else. And so I'm trying to be objective about this and not just say, I don't know, well, you guys just don't know what you're talking about. You don't know how to use this ball, obviously. It's like, no, I have eyes. I can see what it does for everybody else. The Eternity is significantly better for everybody else than it is for me. And I think that the DNA is significantly better for me than it is for everybody else. And so that's why I stuck it down there. The Duo 2, if I had my way about it, it ended up in C tier. I'll pop that Sport Essentials list back up here in a second once we have a few more balls to compare to. The Duo was in C tier for sport conditions because I think it's just too clean and too sharp. Haven't seen a whole lot of pros using it. I think that there's, again, it's not, if you put enough surface on it, you can slow it down. And I think it can be used in some situations, but I think that in those situations, you know, a Duo at 1,000 or 2,000 grit, if you're looking at that, you will already be in a Summit, and the Summit will be better in those situations than the Duo. I think it's the same thing on, and James noticed this too, is that it seems to be very, very matchup dependent. So the Duo for most people is going to look really, really, if it matches up for you like it does for our leadoff bowler on a Thursday night team, it looks ridiculous for her. She throws it every single week. She shoots 680 to 720 every single week. She's putting the Duo down the side, and it looks absolutely ridiculously perfect for her. And for other people, it's kind of like the Journey for me. It's just way too sharp. It's just way too much shape. And the amount of surface I need to put on it to get it to slow down then makes it too strong, too early, too whatever else. So, so I'm going to put the Duo in B tier. It's going to probably stay up toward the front. Again, I think that if you're on a house shot, there's plenty of other balls in this zone that will be similar to but better than the Duo. And then that's one of those weird things, because the Duo is not a bad ball. I don't really like it, but it looks pretty good for Angel. Again, it looks ridiculous for our leadoff bowler on our scratch league. But there's other balls that do the same thing that it does, just better. One of those I think is the Zen Gold Label. It's very similar. It's just more stable, a little more blendy. Similar idea, just more effective. On to the Eternity. The Eternity is a stronger absolute. So I'm just going to go on ahead and put that up here in A tier automatically. Might even be an S tier ball, because where the absolute I think needs some friction to where I actually am going to, it's probably going to end up lower than S tier. I'm going to go ahead and put it up there because the Eternity is an absolute that you can throw on the fresh and then chase left with. It's a ball that if you start in, and as long as you don't, as long as it's not a 5-person, as long as it's not like a 5-man scratch league where you got a bunch of huge rev rates that are just destroying the lane to the point where you can't throw a ball with that kind of a cover, you can move left with it. It's still clean and somewhat sharp, but it's also really controllable. It's directional rather than forward. It's kind of the same idea as the absolute. It's got like an 013 int diff or something like that. Or maybe it's 016, I can't remember. They knock the int diff down a little bit versus the break core, I think is the one. They knock the int diff down a little bit so that it will have that same thing. It won't lock up like stronger asymmetric balls tend to do when they hit friction, just lock up or burn up instantly. So it blends friction a little bit more, but still has that torque. And so I think that the Eternity is just, again, for everybody, literally every single other person that's, well, there's a couple people that said, yeah, I got your experience with the Eternity. It's a, it's a Jurassic Park sized pile of stuff. But that's super, super minority opinion right there. That opinion is in the minority, a significant minority, because it's just really, really good for most people. Yeah, James, 249, 050, 014. So yeah, they did drop the diff a little bit, so the int diff a little bit, so it's borderline. It's on the, I think 013 and below is kind of like mild asim. Anything above 013, 015, 016, definitely. The Eternity is kind of in between a mild asim and a regular asim. So yeah, that James was also going to say, I feel like the Eternity is low S tier. It's not one of the best on the list, but it's definitely just a good ball on everything, period. You can add a little bit of surface to it. It can play on the fresh on some sport conditions, depending on surface prep. So yeah, it's just a great ball. I really wish that I had that experience with it that everybody else did, but it's really good. Eternity Pi. I'm actually going to go on ahead and put, I think that this is going to end up side by side with the Eternity, probably lower S tier. I think that where I had the Pi higher than the Eternity on the sport, just because it's a little earlier and smoother, I think that also knocks it down below the Eternity a little bit on league patterns, but it's every bit as good as the Eternity in general, just quality wise. So if you find that the Eternity is a little long and sharp for you, then you're going to be more in the Eternity Pi. And actually they're so similar that Angel, I've never seen a better bowler to ball matchup than Angel with the Eternity. It's just shockingly, stupidly good. But the Eternity Pi is so close to the Eternity that she got rid of the Eternity because she hates purple. So she throws the Eternity Pi instead of the Eternity, and it is definitely earlier and smoother than the Eternity. I think ultimately the Eternity was more effective for her, but she's got some other stuff. We drilled her an original intense, actually, and that kind of took the place of her Eternity. Plus, she loves the color green, so it all worked out there. But the Eternity Pi is one of those balls that's just going to be great on everything. Both of these Eternity balls are right up there. They're kind of like, I'd look at them as smoother, a little bit more stable reality line balls. So why does Angel hate purple? I have no idea. Her favorite color is green. She can't stand purple. There's no reason. Personal preference. Exotic gem. I am going to put the exotic gem for right now in very, very high A tier. It's earlier, stronger. I think that really the only thing that keeps it out of the S tier is just how strong it is. The Eternity and Eternity Pie, you're going to be able to throw on. They're in that perfect zone to where they can handle more oil, but they're also really good at handling friction. The exotic gem, the gem line in general, they just need oil. And so if you're on a dryer house shot, they're just not going to be throwable. Even if they don't really burn up, they still look good on friction, provided that you have the speed to get them down the lane. If you don't, you're just going to have problems. And so I think that's really the only thing. And I think the other gems are going to end up in the same. The gem will probably, the gem that we're talking about next will probably end up in B tier just because it's too strong. It's just too strong for the majority of house shots. So I'm just going to go ahead and put it there. It's just too strong. It's not that it doesn't look good. And again, if you go back to the review that we did for it, we had it on both a house shot and a sport condition. I was stunned at how good it looked on the. I was stunned at how good it looked on the house shot, because it just didn't. It was definitely way too strong. It just didn't burn up. It didn't quit. I didn't have any problems. So yeah. Teehee. I'm wearing one of their soft shell Coolwick jackets. It's really sharp. I like it. Shameless plug. Back to the show. So yeah, let's do a quick check on the Sport Essentials ranking. So we plopped this up here. Both the Eternity, actually the Eternity was in A tier down here. I had the Pi up in S tier. The Absolute was still up there. I had the Gem in A tier in this one versus it's in B tier. The Duo moves up from C tier to B tier. Clone moves down from S to B. TNT. Pour one out for the homies. DNA was in A tier. I put it in C tier for the house shot. Exotic Gem, I had low S tier. It's very high A tier on the house shot. And I think, again, most sport patterns, there's 1,000 different ones. And so just because you say sport, that's why I've always had trouble with the Sport Essentials, because it's like, were you talking about cheetah or are you talking about dragon? I mean, you know, it's like, yeah, when somebody says, well, I want a Pearl Ball, are you talking Eternity Pearl or Absolute Pearl? Because there's a big difference. Or Exotic Gem Pearl versus, or I guess the Absolute's a hybrid. Everybody thinks it's a Pearl, which is funny. But yeah, are you talking Exotic Gem Pearl, or are you talking like High Road Pearl? Completely different across the board, everything. So a few of these balls have moved up, a few of them have moved down. But stuff like the Eternity Exotic, or the Eternity's Gems, the Absolute are just up there, period. They're pretty good on everything. Yeah, just everything 900 Global is S tier. Global, since they have gone to, I do think that their new brand image, the handcrafted kind of craft beer whiskey vibe that they've got going on works better for them, because they say handcrafted in small batches. Global doesn't put out a whole lot of balls, but they've kind of turned into what Roto Grip was. Because Storm was always we got to put out stuff for the masses that's really versatile, that lots of people are going to like, because it's a brand, it's a bigger brand, and so they had to put out stuff that was a little bit safer, so to speak. Roto Grip was kind of the big and bold, and they're still the big and the bold reactions, but they're a little bit more refined. They pulled back just a little bit from I don't know, this sounds crazy, let's throw it at the wall and see what happens. They've really figured out what they're doing. They're a lot more refined. They're a little safer than they used to be, but they're still the big, bold company. Global seems like they really focus on specific, they target and focus on specific reactions and keep nipping and tucking until they get them where they really want them. And so they release fewer balls, but it seems like what they do put out is really refined. It is crafted. It's really refined. And so I think that brand image now really fits the brand, or just tells you what the brand actually is and what it does. Did the Ruby get discontinued? No, not yet. I think the Ruby will be there for a while. It's been fairly popular. Everybody's like that. It's actually going to end up higher on this list than you would think an IQ might, I think. Hustle M&M, I'm going to stick that in B tier. It's probably going to be lower B tier. The only thing that would keep it out of, again, like the gems that are too strong, the hustles are just going to be a little too weak most of the time for most people's house shots. But again, if you have a rev dominant game, or you don't have a whole lot of speed, either or, it's always a website problem. It's always a website problem. I don't know where they got this new web developer, and I'm not going to say any more than that because I'll get in trouble. He's cost me so much time this year. It's actually infuriating. Just don't pay attention to the website. Most of the stuff's wrong. It just, I'm going to leave that there because I'm going to get mad. Hustle M&M is, again, it's actually a baby duo. Like, it's just straight up the way that the duo reacts. The M&M is the duo with a weaker cover and a weaker core. Perfect step down. Exact same reaction shape. It's that kind of strong, heavy rolling tumble. I think the M&M might be a little earlier than the duo. A little earlier, a little slower. It feels a little bit more stable, but it's just a weaker duo. And so I think that once you do, now it is strong. It's definitely very strong for a hustle. It's kind of oddly strong. It's kind of like the hyped Pearl and the hyped Solid acted like middle of the line strength balls, and then you had the hyped Hybrid where it didn't have the cover strength, but my God, it was early, super chuggy, chonky, whatever else. That's a great analogy. I gotta pop that up. I feel like Global is the Ferrari, Rotogrip is the Mustang, and Storm's a reliable Honda. Yeah, Honda's got some really great stuff, but you can just buy a Honda and it's going to be great. The Global is, the Ferrari is a little bit more rare, a little bit more specific. Rotogrip's the Mustang. I don't like Mustangs personally. I think that a Mustang is what you get if you want to fake having a more powerful car, but you can't afford one, so you buy a Mustang. But yeah. And then this too. Do you think a Storm Summit would be a good replacement for a Zen Master on the left side of the lane? Yes. The Summit is definitely a better Zen Master because the Summit does all the things the Zen Master did. It's early, it's chuggy, it's very controllable, but the Zen Master just puked and gave up. The Summit actually picks up. It doesn't puke. It doesn't give up. It's not forward. The Summit is not only a replacement, it's a significant upgrade versus the Zen Master. If you like the Zen Master, you'll love the Summit. So there's nothing but big thumbs up on that, definitely. Yeah. When you click on all Storm balls, it's just some of the Master Thunder line and spare balls, no Revenant, Premier line. Just, oh my God. If that guy would actually get in his office and do some work and stay out of Chad's Instagram videos, it might be okay. Anyhow, we're talking about bowling balls. So the only thing with the M&M that's going to keep it, again, from being any higher, it's just not quite strong enough. Again, if you're on super dry lanes or you have HPLs or 20-year-old Anvil lane or something like that, it's going to be amazing. I think that the M&M is probably the best bang for your buck on the market right now, period. Just period. Because it reaches so much higher than anything else does. And if you have the friction for it, it's incredible. But I think it's just most people don't have the friction for it, and most people that are going to be using a Hustle M&M are already going to be using something like an Absolute, which is also, it's like a cleaner and sharper M&M, but the cover strengths are actually surprisingly close. A Hustle M&M is kind of like a budget Absolute almost, not as much torque, earlier, smoother. Speaking of the M&M, but yeah, the M&M reaches up super, super far. I think the Rip is kind of in the same zone. It's just more Hustle-like. It's more traditional Hustle-like. It is and pulling back in this this comment that I pinned and saved. Sorry I took so long to get to it. How similar is the Hustle camo to the USA since the camo is discontinued? The Rip is what you're wanting. The USA is not close. The USA is significantly earlier and smoother. The USA is basically a Nova. It doesn't look like it on paper, but on the lane, it's the same ball. It's early, smooth, continuous, controllable. The Hustle camo was cleaner and sharper, very similar to the ink, and the Hustle Rip is virtually the ink. The Hustle camo is a little more directional. The Rip wants to be a little bit rounder and more naturally continuous. But if you want a Hustle camo replacement, absolutely the Rip. No second thoughts, no comparison to anything else. It's right on top of it. I actually in my Hustle Rip review, if you want to check that out, I do compare the camo to it. So if you want to look at that, how it looks compared to both the M&M and the Rip, I don't have a USA. Probably should. But if you want to see it compared to the Hustle camo to see what you're getting, yeah, definitely take a look at that. And I think it's the same deal. Is the Rip is actually significantly cleaner and a little weaker than the M&M is, which doesn't make any sense. But bowling, Storm always likes to, whenever Radical used to target people and say, hey, here's our balls versus their balls on their Throwbot. Storm just kind of like, well, we design balls for people, not robots. So, yeah, bowling's not similarly, robots don't throw bowling balls, and bowling isn't done on paper. So even though it doesn't make sense, the M&M is a couple boards stronger, definitely earlier, chuggier. The Rip is much cleaner, rounder, whatever else. So, yeah. TNT should be Z tier junk ball. Yeah, I should have made a special tier just for that ball. I'm just not that clever. The Rip, again, is a really, the two Hustle balls, the M&M and Rip that are out right now are really, really good. And if you have the friction for them, they're absolutely S or A tier balls. It's just, they're down here because most people don't have enough friction, just like the gems are going to be kind of down here because most people don't have enough oil. So yeah, Throwbot's useless. We're humans. Throwbot has negative tilt too, and I just can't watch it seriously. Ed, you're still with us. Thanks for hanging out and waiting for me to answer the question. It was a good question. Yeah, I love my camo and have well over 200 games on it, 2 trips to nationals. You'd be very happy with a Rip. That's absolutely, it's the same ball makeup. Actually, it's the exact same core, exact same cover, just a little bit different color. So, yep. How close is the Summit to the Supersonic? Still mad I never got one. A Summit or a Supersonic? I'm definitely, I'm mad that I'm actually mad that I had a Supersonic. I wasted time on it. The Summit's very close to the Supersonic. The Summit's just actually good. I think I mentioned this in the Sport Essentials stream last week. The Summit is just so much better than a Supersonic. So, but it's very similar. It's early, it's chonky, it's whatever else. It's just the Supersonic, again, tended, like the Zen Master, to kind of go and just kind of give up. The Summit doesn't give up. It doesn't burn up. It picks up and drives and keeps the pins low, and it hits extra hard, which, again, I thought it was bullshit marketing. But I'm really drinking the Kool-Aid on this AI core so far. Maybe it's the only ball that this is going to work on. But it seems to be a thing. Sorry. I bitch and whine and complain about stuff all the time, and if it actually seems to be, so yeah, I'm the thumbs up on the AI core. The marketing is not wrong in this case. So, all right, now because we were talking about, we'll move into the USA. Same deal. But where do I put it? I'm actually going to put it right behind the clone on B tier if it'll get up there. Come on, come on, work with me. All right, so yeah, the Hustle USA is like it kind of rolls like the M&M. It's heavy rolling and smooth and chonky. If you want a Nova replacement, get a USA. It doesn't make sense. Just trust me. The Hustle USA is significantly stronger than Build. It's early, it's smooth, it's controllable. I think you want to keep some surface on it, like the Nova. Like the Nova, you really want to keep some surface on it because it gets a little iffy, a little wiggly with shine on it. But if you keep surface on it, Angel was using it and you can use it on the fresh on a house shot. You can use it as they get burned up a little bit because it has enough traction to dig and get moving and to really blend out. This is a perfect ball for Cliffy. For if you have like a super wall or a super cliff for your league shot, perfect, beyond perfect, amazing ball for that. The only thing is, again, you need surface on it, and it's good, but there's some other balls that are going to be better. There's just some other stuff that's going to be better. The Hustle is also a baby kind of gem, exotic, magic, whatever else. The Hustle really does act like a gem that's just weaker, that's just less on the traction. Surprisingly good. I think the Hustle line right now is probably the best that we've seen it so far, and that's really saying something considering that we've had balls like the Ink, like some of the older ones that we don't even remember anymore. The Hustle AU, we've had a dozen stateside Hustles. The camo was amazing. The wine was amazing. I think these are the best three that we've had of the Hustles, though. They all look really good. Let me see here. Radical got super annoying with their marketing, constantly tasting side swipes at other companies. Kind of pathetic. Yeah, I think that's just really the thing. If you don't, that's what you do when. I think it's just they thought that they had good stuff, and so they were in. Radical's not necessarily that big of a name, and I think it's kind of like saying, hey, Storm's the big fancy preppy company that everybody goes to. They're the whatever else, but we make stuff just as good as them. So why are we not, or better than them? So why are we not as popular? But when, you got to take shots at other companies instead of just doubling down on saying how good your stuff is. If you have to try to market by tearing somebody else's stuff down, it's just a bad look. So just a bad look. Oh, yes, the camo replaced my old rocket. I can absolutely see that. I love the rocket. I love the rocket. I love the camo, too, and they did actually react very similarly. That's a good, I agree with that completely. Let's see. My younger brother kills it with a supersonic. I don't know. Some people can. I don't know. Should I get a phase 2 if I already have a new Zen? They're different balls. The phase 2 is stronger, definitely. Radical is cheap, unprofessional company. I'd eat razor blades. I'd rather eat razor blades and use a Radical product. Yeah. As you can see, the Motive Venom Shock has more deflection. Was the fate on last year's League Essentials? This is the first League Essentials I've ever done. So I have done the Sport Essentials. And the fate's going to be one of the ones I talk about because I talked about it on the Sport Essentials and it did get discontinued, but I'm trying to just focus on the current stuff right now. But towards the end of the video, I'll get to some of the other stuff because we've got to talk Infinite Physics and Idle Cosmos and Reality Check and Phase 5 and all this stuff that wasn't out very long and got discontinued really quickly. So has anyone shined up a Summit yet? Worried it's too much downlane with shine? It's actually a little too long with shine. I think it works so much better with surface to blend out. It gets a little flat with shine. It goes just a little bit too long. And because it's so slow, it gets behind it and then gets flat is what happens when you polish it. So I like to keep mine, I hit it with a 3000 pad before every league set, just to get that lane shine off. But if you shine it up and you have a higher rev rate, and this is me speaking on the left side, it might actually be frickin' dynamite on the right side. So, love my Hustle USA. Yup. Someone in here was mentioning earlier that they were a 450 rev rate lefty looking for some control. USA, yeah. USA would be nasty for a high rev rate lefty. 2000, 3000 grit. USA is just, yeah, ridiculous. Yes, the Summit Pearl is overseas, unfortunately. All right, I'm gonna get back to the rating. We got some of these that we already know about, the High Road and the High Road Pearl. I think they're going to be. I'm actually going to stick. We're just going to stick both of those in there right now. I think the High Road's actually a better. I think that these even need to. Whoops, no, I didn't want to do that. I think these are both going to go in here because they've got more cover traction than the Hustles, but still, you got to have friction for them to work. Much higher RG cores, so they don't get started up as soon, but they do have more cover traction than the Hustles do, and they haven't been around this long because they're not usable. It's just the problem is now is they're weak enough that they're either going to be used in transition, or unless you have a crap load of friction, they're just not fresh shot league balls. So they're just not anytime league balls for me anymore. I used to use the High Road quite a bit, actually. I really, really like the High Road on the left side, but we have a little bit more volume on our house shot now than we used to, and so it just puts it out of play. For me, I do need to drill another one up, but it does just put it out of usability for me. I think you do need more friction than most people have for both the High Road and the High Road Pearl. The High Road Pearl is a little bit weaker, a little bit longer, a different shape. The High Road's kind of like more of a phase 2 type of shape. It's clean and it's quick, but it's kind of archy. You can get it to go forward if you want it to. You can make it really continuous. The High Road Pearl is just like a longer, sharper version of an IQ Ruby. It's got the same exact shape. It's that really round shaping, continuous, very naturally continuous look. But it is a few feet longer than a High Road. It does have a different shape to it. It is a little bit weaker, and so it just needs even a little bit more friction. So that's why they're in B tier, not because they're not good, but just because they're not quite strong enough for a whole lot of regular use for most people. So Hype Solid, the Hype Solid is very quietly nasty. That's going to go on the bottom of, I think it's probably going to be on the bottom of A tier. It's like a longer and sharper IQ Tour, but there's enough cover traction to where it can handle heavier volumes of stuff than a High Road Pearl, Hustles, whatever else. Very controllable, very round shaping. You can play straight with it. You can get deeper with it. It's very versatile, and it's strong enough to put it in play on a little bit heavier volumes than any of the rest of this stuff will be in play on. So, some of these, my buddy's a two-hander, 500 plus revs, swears by the Hustle USA as a house shot killer. Yeah, absolutely believe that. It's just dumb. Hustle overseas, chili, VTC solid, same as the Rip. Yeah, I think that there's a color difference. So the chili is kind of an orange. I think the chili is actually going to be a little bit earlier and smoother just due to the color difference. Red, I think, hooks, or red, orange, whatever else hooks a little bit more, is a little bit smoother. So yeah, virtually the same as the Rip, a little earlier and smoother, I would expect, but not significantly so. Woof. We're going to have words here. What balls would you like to see them remake and bring back? Spitfire, absolutely. Fired Up. The Fired Up and the Diablo are two of the worst balls I've ever thrown. It's not close. And actually, after I was a Stormhead, so I got a Brunswick Purple Monster was my first reactive ball. Then I got a Storm Trauma, was hooked on Storm, and so I had all kinds of El Niños, Traumas, X Factors, Erasers, all kinds of stuff from Storm for years until they came out with the reactor cover stock on the Fired Up and Diablo. They were so dog shit garbage that I didn't throw Storm again for almost a decade. I bought a Prodigy was when I got back in, was when I gave Storm a chance again. But my God, then I drilled a bunch of Brunswick stuff for a while, and then I threw some Lane 1, then I threw some Hammer. And so, yeah. Terrible. Fired Up was, man, I would put it, wherever the TNT lands, I would like drop it down to like double Z or something to put the Fired Up there. But again, Reactor has obviously been a very, very popular cover stock, and it's still the base for R2S, R3S, R4S, whatever else. So Reactor arguably was really good. It's just Fired Up was terrible for me. Anyway, back on topic, the Hyped Pearl or the Hype Solid. I think the M&M is the best bang for the buck on the market for that price point. You hop one up, and I think the Hype Solid is by far the best bang for your buck at that price point. Just strong enough to put it in play a little bit more, especially if you put some surface on it, but it can reach down if you let it shine up a little bit. So yeah, really, really good. Yeah, speaking of so since I mentioned it, what balls would you like to see them remake? X Factor and Prodigy, definitely. And again, what brings the Prodigy back up is the Kinetic Cobalt, which recently got discontinued from track. I don't get other company envy very much, but my God, the new blue and that Kinetic Cobalt. Yeah. My Hype Solid actually was super similar shape-wise to my Pin Down Venom Shock. A bit easier through the fronts, but otherwise super duper close. Yeah, I think we actually filmed for that, and I just didn't have the cones to put that comparison up on the channel. But the Hype Solid, not quite as strong, a little bit longer, a little bit smoother than the Venom Shock. Very close to a Venom Shock, though. IQ Ruby. I think this is going to go up in A tier, and it's going to go right in front of the Hype Solid, because the Ruby, I think they did something, and there's kind of a rumor going around. Yeah, yep, I was just going to say that, Michael. Perfect timing. IQ Tour Ruby cover, do you feel like they strengthened the R2S cover on that one? That's the prevailing rumor, and I would have to agree, because the Emerald for me was bad. The IQ Ruby handles volume significantly better than other Pearl IQs have before. It's also sharper, and I think it's sharper because it handles the volume a little bit better. I think that the other ones, if they were on a little bit too much volume, they struggled to kind of get going, and so then they just kind of labored down lane. The Ruby digs through a lot more than the other Pearl IQs have. I think the Ruby has had the cover strengthened a little bit, especially with what they've been going through. I think they bumped the hardness on everything. It feels like they bumped because of all the hardness issues that they've had, and they had the Spectre got banned and the other ones got soft banned. I think that they bumped the hardness on everything a couple points just to stay out of trouble, and that will also make, once you make the hardness higher, it reduces the footprint, and so it reduces the overall strength of that cover. And so I think that they made slight adjustments to some of the covers, and I think it almost feels like R2S now is R3S. Like the IQ Ruby feels like it has the Revenant cover on it. That's what it really feels like. It feels like R2S R2S now is what R3S used to be. That's what it really feels like, because the Ruby just feels like a stronger Revenant, really. because the Revenant has a much higher, it's got a higher differential, but it's got a lot higher RG too, so it doesn't get started as early. The Ruby is significantly more dynamic than the other ones. It can cover a lot more boards. I think you have an arrow deeper with the Ruby than you have with any other IQ ball ever. It's shockingly good. And so I think it definitely deserves to be in A tier. It might even be a little bit higher, because I think that while the Absolute isn't a fresh house shot condition ball, I think the Ruby actually is, because the Ruby's a little bit more stable. I think the only thing that keeps the Absolute out of a fresh condition ball is that it's more responsive. And so if you have dead fresh conditions, it's going to be a little bit too sharp off the dry and a little bit too weak in the oil. The IQ is naturally smoother anyway. And so it's, even if you have wet dry to start off with, it's going to blend that better than the Absolute will. And it's strong enough now that I think you can absolutely start with it on fresh conditions. So yeah, IQ Ruby I didn't like because it's too quick and angular, so I could definitely believe it's somehow stronger after the changes. I was very, very shocked with mine, and it's still in the rotation. James actually threw his in league last night and it looked really good. Jonathan, my breakdown pair co-host, throws his quite a bit. So yeah, it's a player. I think it absolutely deserves to be up there. IQ Tour Solid, I'm going to put that down here. It's going to be under the gem in B tier. Again, it's one of my favorite lefty balls for a long time. Had some of my better series with it. Almost shot 300 with it a couple times. Really good ball. It just, there are a lot of better things out there. The Hype Solid, namely because it's a little longer, a little faster. And so the thing that keeps the IQ Solid out is it's really early. It controls the middle part of the lane really good, but then you can't get very deep with it, and it's kind of slow on the back end. And so the running joke is that if you want to get 9 spare, throw the IQ Tour. It's really good at getting 9, which makes it pretty effective on sport patterns, but that's not really what you want on house shots. And there's balls that are very similar to it, like the Hype Solid, like the Exponent that we're going to talk about here in a minute, that are the same idea, just better. So redrilling the Revenant with pin and the ring finger to see if it's usable. Yeah, the Revenant is kind of back and forth. Mine and Angels were terrible out of the box, and it didn't have anything to do with the layout. It was that surface. Angels never really got fixed. Mine was amazing after I fixed the surface. What's a good replacement for the Halo Pearl? I'm the Absolute. The Absolute, because it's the same type of ball. The Exotic is way too strong. That's one of those one Pearl ball doesn't equal another Pearl ball things. The Exotic gem is several feet earlier, a whole lot chunkier, heavier rolling. The cover stock's miles stronger. So the Absolute is absolutely a Halo Pearl replacement. It's pretty well dead on. Maybe not on paper, not quite on paper, but very, very similar. I bowl with James, so no, he still beat me last night too. I beat him Thursday night. It doesn't happen very often. But yeah. So the IQ is just down here because, again, it doesn't quite have the traction to make it a fresh shot ball necessarily unless you put some surface on it, and then you just really can't get inside third arrow with it. It really doesn't like it unless you slow hook it, or a two-hander with a big rev rate and you slow hook it. Then it will work out just fine. But generally speaking, the IQ is just still around because it's the IQ. There's not a whole lot of people throwing them anymore, either on sport conditions or house shots, and just not usable much, really. It's not a bad ball. It's still, you always know what you're going to get from an IQ Tour Solid. It's showing its age, really. All right, the new hotness, the Journey. I'm going to pop this back. I'm going to pop our Sport Essentials back up and see where we're at now. So what we've got right now is, so the other stuff that we've added, the high roads, the IQ. The high roads and IQ flipped a little bit on the Sport Essentials. The high roads a little bit better than an IQ on a house shot. The hustles are still in the same place for kind of the same reasons. The IQ Ruby is again up in A tier. The Hype Solid's still in A tier. The Hustle USA drops down a little bit because it's just too smooth. DNA is significantly down, even though I think it needs to be up higher, but I also think that Eternity needs to be down with the TNT and D tier, but we're going on average stuff here. So fairly similar, surprisingly similar for some balls so far, but we'll see. All right, the Journey is the new hotness. Moving on to the current flavor. It's new enough that there's not a whole lot of people have had a whole lot of time with it, so we don't exactly know with this quite yet. I've seen some big sets with it. I'm going to put it on the low end of A tier for right now. It might end up higher. The cover traction is definitely enough. It's definitely something you can start with in League, and I think it's going to be really effective on the right side of the lane, especially on because it is really clean for how much ground it covers down lane. And so it just feels like an absolute house shot killer because you're not going to have to fight it for length. It's going to pop down lane. The cover is going to make it somewhat blendy, especially on the right side of the lane where you have the track friction, the front to back friction to deal with. Angels looks really good. Angels looks really good. Yeah, is the Journey all hype? The reviews I've seen, it just doesn't look good, but they say it's good. I think it's one of those things where it just, the way that it rolls just looks weird. Just optically, for some people, it just doesn't, because it doesn't really rev. That's the thing. I think that's why it looks so weird. It just tumbles. But it's very clean. It's very sharp. It just doesn't really rev up. And so it looks like it just kind of flop, 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 and then it strikes most of the time. Mine is way too much skid and snap. Even at 2000 grit, it's just way too angular for me to throw. It looks really good for Angel though, because it's something that she can use. She can use it as a ball down from her Summit or from some of the other stronger stuff that she throws from her Duo or from her Eternity Pie. Stuff like that. So I think it's a longer, sharper exotic gem, really. Longer, sharper Summit. I think it is solid, and it's definitely going to be better on house shots than sport patterns. So I think it is. Now, whether or not you want to spend $200 on a Journey, you can just go on ahead and buy an exotic or a magic for that. Or an Eternity, Duos are cheaper. What else is in it? Summit's cheaper. Zen Gold Label's cheaper. Zen is cheaper. So whether or not you want to spend $200 on one, I don't know. But that kind of is what it is. The Magic Angel. Well, we did get them, but we got them so late that there wasn't any point in making a video. They just kind of screwed. They kind of screwed us on that. So those are just going to be giveaway items in our fundraiser, our Doggo fundraiser that we're going to do here in a couple weeks. The Magic I'm going to put in low A tier above the Journey, though, because the Magic looks great for everybody. The Magic looks really good, and it's, again, you can see that the exotic is in front because the gems have the same cover stock, and within the same formula, the hierarchy generally holds true. Now it absolutely doesn't with the M&M and the Rip, because the Rip is solid, but it's significantly cleaner and sharper than the M&M is. The gems actually kind of follow suit. The gem is the earliest and smoothest. The exotic's the longest and the sharpest, and the Magic is a lot of people have said it's closer to the gem, nearly on top of it, but it is cleaner. It is a little cleaner and sharper, and it looks fairly versatile. A lot of the people I've talked to, Nick Brown really likes his, and I think it's in that zone to where you do need oil for it, but you don't need near as much oil as you need for like the gem. So, yeah. So I'm going to put the magic gem at the bottom of A tier. And again, just it needs oil. The gems above everything else, they just need oil, not because they're going to burn up, but just to get them down the lane. So phase 2, this one's been around forever. I think it fits actually kind of at the top end of. I think it's just one of those balls that's good on everything, and it might even be above an absolute. I think it needs a little bit more oil. I think of the two going between phase 2 and absolute, I think the absolute's going to be more generally usable, even though it needs more friction. But friction is generally abundantly available on sport or on house patterns, on league conditions. The phase 2 is just right there. If you let it lane shine a little bit, very, very effective on everything. That's why it's been that's why it's kind of quietly been around for 6 or 7 years now. And the reason that it's been around so long is because it actually performs. I mean, some of this stuff like the High Road Pearl IQ, those just don't really even sell anymore. They're just keeping them around just so that they can say that they've been around for a while. Nobody really buys those anymore. The phase 2 people are still buying. Now, not as much as the other stuff. I think the phase 2, part of the phase 2 is still around just because just because of history. If they had to base it on sales numbers, it would probably be discontinued too. It's just still a lot of tournament bowlers throw them. That's one of those, nobody really drills high roads or IQs anymore. Tournament bowlers still drill phase 2, so it's still got a low hum going on, and they're still very used a lot on the tours. So yeah, pitch black. There's no reason to even really rate this. It would be kind of unfair to it. I would put it in D tier. It would be above the TNT. But a pitch black is just not a house shot ball. Maybe on some like crazy conditions, maybe you've got some weird stuff going on, and or maybe you throw the ball really slow and you're one of these urethane goes on dry house shots people. It doesn't, and it's not a house shot type of urethane ball like a new blue hammer or a purple hammer. You can get away with using those on house shots. If you have to throw a pitch black on a house shot, you've got problems. You've got problems. I'm not saying you personally have issues or problems. I'm saying that the problems exist. If you're forced into throwing a pitch black because nothing else works, there are problems with the situation, not necessarily you. Let me clarify that a little bit. Yeah, how's it possible I never bought a phase 2? Every time I look at other bowling balls, I feel guilty that I never bought that one. I think a lot of people have bowling balls like that, to where there was a time where after I kind of discovered the Summit, or it really clicked for me, I would still end up trying to use other balls because it's like, well, I got the Summit. I know what the Summit does. I want to use this other stuff. And then it would always screw me over. So, I think the phase 2 is one of those things. It's like, oh, it's phase 2. It's been around forever. It's not new. It's not interesting. It's not unique. It's not whatever else. And so you just, it's kind of like having money and thinking, okay, well, I could go get a lesson, or I need a new bowling bag, or I need a pair of shoes. Those things aren't exciting. If you have the money to buy something, you want to buy a bowling ball. The phase 2 is kind of like a bag or a pair of shoes or a lesson. Probably what you should spend your money on, but not really what you want to spend your money on. Reality, I'm going to put that up at the very, very top of A tier, if it will let me. Because I think that it's not as early and strong. It should probably be an S tier, though, realistically. If the Eternities are up there, yeah, I'm going to put it up there. It has to be up there. Because the only thing that keeps the exotic out of it is it rolls significantly heavier. It's almost as strong as a reality, and it rolls significantly heavier. The reality is kind of like an asymmetric phase 2. You let it lane shine a little bit. It absolutely is in play on a lot of league conditions. So yeah, my reality is just so good that I can't see myself putting it down for the phase 2. Well, the reality is an asymmetric phase 2. It's. I mean, the reaction shape is virtually identical. I couldn't ever throw a reality either because it does all the same things that the phase 2 does. It has a little bit more torque and it's a little stronger. So if you have a reality, you don't necessarily need a phase 2. However, if you have a reality, you would absolutely, if you love a reality, you would absolutely love a phase 2. So there'd just be nothing to worry about there. So yeah, I think the reality really does deserve the S tier because it's good on everything. It's just good on everything. It's remarkably versatile. It's very quietly been out for like 3 years now. I don't know if a whole lot of people realize that. It's actually still in production, and it's been around almost as long as the Zen, almost, if not same amount of time. It's very quietly stuck around, but it, again, when the tour players still use it an awful lot too, when they need the phase 2 type of look, but they need a little bit more torque, a little bit more stability, more pickup down lane, they'll throw a reality. Those two go really, really well together. Revenant. Revenant, I am going to stick that right between the Ruby and the Hyped Solid on A tier. The problem with the Revenant is that some people got good ones and some people got bad ones. So the Revenant for most people is either going to be really, really good, or it's just going to be, why is that not under the TNT and D tier? the TNT is down in D tier because pretty well everybody has had the same experience with it. The Revenant was very hit or miss for people. I think that generally speaking, if you got a good one, definitely an A tier. A little bit longer, sharper, not quite as stable as an IQ Ruby. I had a lot of good sets with it. It's still close to the rotation, but I've just found when I need a Revenant type of look, the Zen Gold label fits there a little bit better because it's got a little bit stronger core. The higher RG stuff doesn't work out so well for me on the left side. I just don't have enough mid lane control, I don't feel like. The Revenant is kind of a longer and sharper IQ Ruby. I think the Ruby is a little bit more usable just because, again, it's a little bit more stable. But yeah, I think that the Revenant is, if you got a good one, and again, the reactive gloss just absolutely has to come off of that one. The gloss just in general is bad, but some people have, it's been okay for some people on some bowls. Like the exotic for me was just fine. I tried it out of box and it was fine. But it's better to just take it off because it's been bad for so many people that even, some people, oh, it's been good for me on some of the balls. It's like, well, why risk it? Just change the surface to something you know is going to be good. So Revenant definitely needs a surface reset. I would imagine it's about to be discontinued. Something I forgot to mention earlier is that apparently the absolute DNA and TNT have been marked down on some websites. That's usually an indicator that they're close to being discontinued. I would imagine the Revenant's right there because it came out with the absolute. They made like 15 videos for the absolute, blew their entire marketing budget for the year on it. And they just did not even act like the Revenant existed. It was kind of like the Nova and the Nova and the Spectre. Just the Nova got all the hype. Nobody cared about the Spectre, and then they announced the Phase 4 a week before the Spectre came out. This that ended up being a happy accident that they kind of killed the Spectre, but they just absolutely murdered the Revenant. It's just the same way that they've done with the TNT Infused. The TNT was bad. Nobody's going to care about the Infused, and then they announced the Journey a couple weeks before the Infused comes out. So the Infused is a we're going to talk about that in a second. It's a surprisingly good ball that's unfortunately going to be overlooked by the majority of people because the TNT was bad and because the Journey released right on top of it, basically. So I think I answered some of those questions. The TNT seems pretty much universally hated. How long does a company keep balls like this in their portfolio when it gets overwhelmingly poor reactions? Typically, they don't want to get rid of them too quick because it just looks bad. It's almost like, well, if people say it's bad and then we just go ahead and discontinue it 6 months later, that's kind of like us admitting that it's also bad. And then people will say, okay, well, if they knew it was bad in the first place, why did they even release it? I don't think that they expected the reception to be like this necessarily. This is the one single, I think this is the one single ball that Schlem has missed on in like the last 5 or 6 years. I mean, ever since they came out with the Haywire, Roto just really, that was always my thing. I've talked to Schlem a couple times. I had him on, I did an interview with him for the channel a couple years ago. And that was one of my things to him. Was like, dude, you just don't miss. And I've sent him personal messages too. And I'm like, damn, dude, you just hit this out of the park again. The TNT is the only ball that they've like super missed on for a long time. Some of them have been, okay, well, this one's better than this other one, or this one wasn't. This one's okay, but it's not anything crazy. Man, if you just think about all the Roto stuff, the Hustle line is amazing. The Idols were all good. The UC3, the Rubicon line was good. The Tour Dynamics is good. The gems are amazing. Both UFOs were really good. The Halos were good. It's just hard. The RSTs, the X3 wasn't great, but there's still a lot of people that, so I wouldn't necessarily call the X3 a miss. It just wasn't as good as some of this other stuff, but Roto consistently releases such bangers. That might be, again, why the TNT is even more disliked, because it's like, well, we're just not used to this from Roto. And if something is, not really that great like this, it's like, oh, it's terrible, just because we expect more out of Roto, really. So, all right. Got some Chad still throwing the UFO alert. Angel just got hers back out. And it looked really good in league on Thursday. So, all right. So yeah, that's kind of the story with, I think, yeah, Reality is the last one that deserves A tier, definitely. Infused equals less expensive Journey. Not really. The Infused is less cover, a whole lot earlier rolling, a whole lot more stable. They're definitely different. They could absolutely coexist in the same bag. They just not very similar. Oh, not in my league. It's Overseas Spectre Sapphire. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Miso. We getting a delivery? I don't know. Yeah, I feel like the Reality Check is another. Well, and this is the thing, is they discontinued all the 4K fastballs really fast. So, all right, we got to talk about the Summit now. This is going to hurt a little bit. I'm going to put it at the very top of A tier because it's more throwable. Okay, if it lets, no, not that. Nope. Okay, there we go. I really think it should be at the absolute top of S tier, period. I realize most people aren't going to have my experience. It's the only thing is it's pretty early and it's pretty slow. And so it's just going to be a flat 10 monster for some people. Angels is somewhat mediocre as well. She brought it out last night. She had it in her giveaway pile because she throws other stuff that are similar, but just better. And she brought it out last night. And again, it's a little apathetic. for her. And I imagine that's going to be some people's experience. It just, if they're used to cleaner, sharper, the Summit is one of the most unique balls any company has put out in years. It does not act anywhere like a Storm ball, but it also doesn't act like a Motive ball. It doesn't act like a B7 ball. I don't even know what it is. It's just different. Very early heavy rolling, but without, it's almost like a, I would almost say it's kind of a symmetric exotic gem. If even that. It's just so blendy and so versatile and does everything right, and it hits the pins hard, and it even on the bad hits. And that was the thing about the marketing, is they weren't trying to say, oh, this ball hits harder. They said specifically it carries the off hits better. That's completely different from saying it hits hard, because everybody says that everything hits hard. It's like, oh, it hits really hard. It's like this one, it says no, that the AI cover makes the core a little bit stronger, plus it helps it carry the off hits a little bit better. And it absolutely does carry the off hits better. It doesn't necessarily hit harder. It's just on the bad shots, when you feel like you're going to leave an opposite corner pin or maybe a flat corner pin, it kicks those what you would think would be flat corner pins more often than another ball. It carries those kind of sloppy, you just kind of missed it off your hand, lame duck, ugly looking shot. It carries the ugly shots better. It just does. Sorry. Yeah, and Felix, this is exactly what happened to me. Summit was nuts once I backed my hand out and let it work instead of making it work, if that makes any sense. Because, yeah, I got all excited about it in the review on Chromium, which is longer, heavier volume than our league shot, and I got on our league shot, and it was just too early. It was just too strong. And then once I got it down the lane, it was just lazy and flat. And I'm like, well, it's so close, though. And as soon as I just popped my hand open, got a little bit freer with my hand, it made the ball do the right things in the right place, and it just turned into magic. And I don't even have to throw it that good. All I have to do is kind of flop it out there in the right general direction. It holds on misses in, it gets back on misses out, and when it hits with conviction. So it's just dumb. It's just dumb. And I really think it should be the top of S tier for everything, but there are some people that will not match up with it for one reason or another. It is a very strong ball, so it's not going to be in play on all league conditions. We have a decent amount of oil for our league. I think we have a 41 or 42 foot pattern at probably 23-ish mils, 24 maybe. So we have a little bit longer, heavier pattern than most people are going to have. Most people are going to have a lot more friction, so they're either not going to be able to get the ball down the lane, or it's just going to be a little too early and slow. So that, I think, is the only thing that keeps it down here. I had it in S tier on the Sport Essentials, but I think it's just the strength, the overall strength, and kind of the ball shape is going to keep it out of there. But I definitely, it's in play on a lot of league conditions, and the fact that it doesn't burn up is the other thing. That if you can get it down the lane and get it through the pins kind of the right way, even if it is a little too strong for the conditions, it's just good stuff. So yeah, carries ugly shots, count me in. It does. I'm absolutely fully drinking the Kool-Aid on this one. I hate marketing nonsense, and for some reason that's all we seem to put out anymore, but this actually I think you can trust. Yeah, the golf ball theory worked out for the Summit. I thought the same thing, because everybody tries, oh yeah, our ball hits harder. This ball carries the off hits better. Whatever, but it actually works here. Do you feel like the Summit can be a viable replacement for the Phase 2? Is there a need for both in the bag? I'm the only bowler who didn't match up with the Phase 2. Well, it's kind of funny because I really like the Phase 2 on the right side. Trash can, straight up trash can on the left side. The Summit and the Phase 2 are just not remotely close. Now, in this case, however, if you didn't match up with the Phase 2, I think you would like a Summit. They're not very close. They could absolutely fit in the same bag together. And I would say that, yes, if you didn't like the Phase 2, then yes, I think you would like the Summit instead. Stuff. Yeah, I'm gonna make everybody buy a Summit. Sorry, just buy a Summit. The vast majority. This is one of the Summit is probably one of the balls I feel the most comfortable with generally recommending to people. It's always very tough because I don't want to say, oh yeah, this ball's great, go get it, and then somebody spends 250 bucks on a boat anchor. People don't really have, it's not like some other stuff where it's like you go buy it and it's like, okay, whatever, it's not that good. Oh well. There's no oh well about 250 bucks for most people out there. And it's very, very, I mean, it's disappointing for me. And I don't pay for the majority of stuff. I mean, I do pay for it. It's one of those, you get free money. I always tell people you get free money at your job too. All you have to do is show up and work for it. I just pay in a much different way. But it hurts me because reviews are like a 10 hours over 2 days type of deal. By the time it's all said and done, I mean, it's significant amount of time. And so if you budget it at just say and even without the actual cost of the materials, the gas, the cost of all the electronics and equipment and whatever else, if you don't factor any of that in and you just do time, it's 10 hours, just even put it at 15 bucks an hour. I'm still paying as much. I'm just paying in a different way. So, so anyway, yeah, it still hurts me when I drill something that ends up sucking because I'm like, man, I just spent 10 hours of my life and got a boat anchor for it. That's awesome. But the Summit, again, circling back to my point here, the Summit, I am the most comfortable out of any ball on this list, probably. Any ball on this list, the Summit is the ball I'm the most comfortable with, generally recommending to everybody. The vast majority will like it. Some of you won't match up with it, and I don't know which ones it's going to be. And so it's very, very hard. I feel bad sometimes. Even if it's one of those, because sometimes I don't know which ones are going to suck. Sometimes I'm surprised by some. I'm surprised by some either one way or the other. Like I was thinking the Journey was going to be better for me than it ended up being. And so that's a little bit disappointing. But at the same time, I have no idea who's going to get the $250 boat anchor. But that's kind of a risk with, at least you have a better idea going into something. It's still going to happen. You're still going to spend a bunch of money on something that ends up sucking, no matter how much information, research, whatever else you put into it. Sometimes it's just going to happen. I don't want to be the one to tell you to go buy it and then it sucks. But the Summit, I'm the most comfortable with, generally recommending. Moving on. I talked that into the ground. The TNT infused. This is going to be surprising. But I'm actually going to stick that sucker right up here behind the Summit. I thought this ball was going to suck. This is the one that surprised me pleasantly, the opposite direction. The Journey was a little disappointing because it's just way too fast. I can't put enough surface on it to blend it out and still have it be usable at the same time. It's way too fast. Never going to see any time. Probably not going to see any lane time for me again. Because I just don't bowl on that many sport patterns, and I don't want something that does nothing for 30 feet and then jackknifes on the back end. That's just not a good look on the left side of the lane. Angels looks amazing though. So take that how you want to take it. I thought that with the TNT having such an early rolling core, I thought that the cover on the TNT being kind of cleaner, I thought, man, if the TNT is already this bad, if you try to make that chonky, chuggy, heavy rolling shape longer and quicker, that's just going to look even worse. Because normally when you have a really strong core with a really clean cover on it, sometimes it works amazingly, like in the case of an Absolute or an Astrophysics. Sometimes it's wretchedly bad. Sometimes the core just wants to do things that the cover can't keep up with. Or in the case of the Duo, I think the Duo is kind of a cover core mismatch in favor of the cover. Like the core just really doesn't help the core, or the core doesn't really help the cover out much. And I think the The DNA might be a little bit of the same for most people. Like the core really, really wants to get stuff done, and that cover is just nowhere near as strong as they advertised it or expected it to be. It might be one of those, okay, it's strong on paper, but it just really doesn't act like it on the lane. Yeah. So the only thing wrong with the TNT infused is that it claims to be in TNT. You can tell in the reaction shape, it's generally a reaction. It generally works together. The thing is, though, is that the TNT actually allowed the core to do what the core wanted to do, which is be early and smooth. The cover went with that a little bit too much. The cover let it, okay, roll early, wants to hook early. Well, the cover went on ahead and made it hook early. And then that made it too slow down lane. And then you had to move in to get it down the lane. And then all of a sudden it wanted to just chug and stop. It was, again, it's a little too urethane-y. The infused actually works out well because the cover and core, even though they're, I think, even further apart as far as the match goes, I think they work out perfect because the core still rolls early. It's very heavy rolling, very strong, very stable. The cover doesn't let it get started quite as quick. And so it controls, it's very stable. It controls the mid part of the lane without really digging in the mid part of the lane. But then when this cover wants to be clean, and it is clean, but then this cover, again, it's the hybrid version of the RSTX2 cover. So very clean, very sharp. The core keeps the cover more controlled and stable than it wants to be, because the core, again, wants to be very early, strong, stable, heavy rolling. The cover wants to go 60 feet and turn sideways, and they meet in the middle. So the core keeps the cover stable and more controllable, and the cover gets the core down the lane and then adds a little bit of shape. So the TNT infused is very surprising in a very positive direction. It works so well, I think, on house shots because the cover strength puts it in play on most house shots. And even if you do have a little bit more oil than the cover might want to hang out with, the core makes things happen. The cover gives the overall ball the core gives the overall ball reaction a lot more strength than you would think from that cleaner, sharper cover. But the cover makes the core a little bit more usable, dynamic than it is on paper. So yeah, with my tilt, the TNT was dead on arrival. It was for most. I had the same problem, because I had to get around it to get it to finish down lane. The infused is still forward. It still wants to be forward. It's even past directional, because you have continuous, then you have directional, which can be continuous or it can be forward, depending on what you do with your hand. And then you have stuff that just predominantly wants to be forward. The TNT infused is in the predominantly forward, where I think the Duo, for example, is in the directional, and then something like an IQ Ruby is in the more continuous, wants to be predominantly continuous. The infused is, I am almost as comfortable recommending the infused to people as I am with the Summit. It's just that the infused does want to be forward. So if you have a little bit of tilt, if you have a more forward ball roll already, you're probably not going to like it. But for a lot of people, it's going to be surprisingly good. It's going to be very surprisingly good. And even though I have a more forward roll, it is so clean that I can actually get around it a little bit more. It lets me get around it without it stopping and going sideways. So it's just is the TNT infused like a symmetric UFO alert? Somewhat. It's definitely earlier rolling than the alert. It's not as continuous, but it is kind of. I would say that the IQ Ruby is closer to a symmetric alert. Even the Revenant, perhaps. Tour dynamics. This is an interesting one because it has consistently and continually fallen from grace with me. but it looks really good for righties. The problem is that with it, lane shines really, really fast, and it needs, because of how weak the cover is, it's basically the VTC cover. It's Tour Tracks, but it's based on the VTC cover from the Hustles. It doesn't hold surface very long at all, and with it lane shined, it's just not strong enough to be in play on the left side of the lane. However, that makes it kind of really perfect. It's like I told people constantly, so I'm going to put it right here, right under the clone in B tier. I think it deserves to be in C tier, even D tier for me, because it's just not usable. For righties, it's more like an A or maybe even S tier, because it's just a straight up better IQ. It does literally all the same things the IQ does, but it's more versatile left to right. You can continue to move in with it because it does have that little bit of asymmetry, that little bit of int diff to help it kind of cover some more boards. I think that the diff is a little too low. The cover strength is a little too low. If it had like an 035 diff with the same int diff, if it had, so it's 011 int diff, I'm pretty sure, but if it had like an 035 int diff rather than a 026 diff, and if the cover was the clone cover, amaze balls, perfect ball, virtually the perfect ball, if it was those things. But it's just a little on the weakish side. But with more track friction on the right side, it looks a lot better. There's a guy in our Thursday night league, James will know, Mike Tennyson. He's done really well with the tour dynamics the entire year, and with the extra friction on the lane friction on the right side of the lane, it just looks really, really good for him. I think it actually, it looks the best with surface on it, but the surface doesn't stay on it for long. But again, on the right side of the lane, it shines as the lane gets drier. So it works. You put a little bit of surface on it, hit it quick with a 2,000, 3,000 pad before you start league. It'll shine as the lane transitions. You can use it the whole night. Great ball. It's just a little bit on the weakish side, and I think it looks a lot better for people with rev rate. If you don't have a whole lot of a rev rate, it's going to be a little long and kind of blah. Thank you, Matt. I just want to thank you in advance for your continuously informative, entertaining content. Keep it coming. We'll definitely do. Thank you much. Thank you so much for a donation. I'm still blown away that that people would even send in $5, because just getting your credit card out and putting your information in and then sending any kind of money to somebody on the internet, not something that a whole lot of people would do. So I appreciate it very, very much. Yeah, and I think there's a couple people that have answered this. Missed the beginning. Just curious what the criteria for the difference between S tier and A tier. Just asking, since he's saying the Summit, he'd recommend the Summit to anyone, but it's A tier instead of S tier. So the S tier stuff is going to be stuff that the vast majority of people can succeed with on anything, basically. I can see where the Summit would not be good for a certain small group of people. And so, yes, it does sound a little contradictory that I'd say, oh yeah, I'd recommend this to anybody above any ball on this list, but it's not the first ball in S tier. I think that just these other balls up here being asymmetric and having more flip, I think that that's the only thing that really separates them. As far as a general ball, I think that the Summit is probably the best on the list as far as being versatile between sport patterns and house patterns. But most house bowlers, the average for USBC is 175. That 175-ish, give or take. That's the average. And most people throw the ball 15, 16 miles an hour at like a 300 rev rate. And so stuff like the Eternity Pi reality is going to be better on house shots for the average bowler than a Summit would be. as far as overall, the overall grand scheme, I think the Summit for me is the most easily recommendable ball, because something like the Reality, Eternity Pi, and Eternity is going to be too sharp, too dynamic, too much ball for some people as far as the overall grand scheme of things. It's just like some of these balls. Again, a clone I had rated in S tier for sport patterns, but a B tier, and it's not necessarily bad for house shots. It's just there are things that are better. I think as far as just general overall complete total package, overall purpose, I think the Summit is the best ball in our lineup right now. But as far as specifically recommending or ranking things based on house shots for the vast majority of bowlers, that's what just keeps it out of S tier. I might even put it, depending on what we end up, because I mean, I thought we'd have a whole lot more balls in S tier than we do. So I might even kick that and the infused up to S tier by the time we get done with this. But there's a couple here later. There's a couple down here that I think that are actually going to end up on that list up in the S tier. So anyway, that's it right there. Put the sport shot overlay back up. Okay, so yeah, it's been a while. So before we get these last 4 balls, I will put this back up. And sorry, it has to cover this whole screen, so you're not going to be able to remember stuff. So main differences here. Again, I've got the Summit above the Pi in S tier, and I think that, and I did mention that the only reason that the Summit wasn't the #1 sport essential ball is because we've had such history with the other ones. I mentioned in the sport essentials video that we need more time with the Summit to figure it out, because the phase 2 is 6 or 7 years old. The Reality is 3 years old. The Pitch Black's been around for 6 or 7 years. We have the history with those, so we have the confidence with those. We know exactly what's going on with those. The Summit's been out for 5 months, not even 5 months yet, because it came out in late June. So I don't think that there's enough time with the Summit yet for me to do that. But I think that the Summit in another year or so will be the very best ball, the very top ball for sport conditions in S tier. And once I get a little bit more feedback with it from league bowlers, it probably will be an S tier, might even be the top of S tier up there too, because generally it's going to be a little bit more controllable for people, a little bit more usable, because it is symmetric. More people use symmetric balls on average than asymmetric balls. People like to buy asymmetric balls because they're sexier, but I think people actually score better with symmetric balls the majority of the time. Tour Dynamics is down a tier, but it was designed for sport. It was designed for sport. That's where it's going to be. I had the TNT infused in B tier just because it's not quite as versatile as something like an Absolute. But given a little bit more lane to play with, a little bit more room to play with, it hops up to A tier. Some of these other ones, the Revenant was in B tier. I've got it in A tier for the house shot. Let me see. Phase 2 was actually an S tier on sport patterns. It was the first. Yeah, phase 2 is top ball in S tier for sport patterns, mostly based on the history. It's middle of A tier for house shots. There's just better stuff. So yeah, that's kind of what that list looks like right now. We'll go back to the regular list, and I'm gonna start. I got 15 minutes. After this, if you're watching live, after this, I am doing yet another stream, and Casey Murphy is a friend of mine. He's a fellow Storm staffer. He's from Springfield, Missouri. He has bowled on for Travel League and has recorded himself bowling on certified string pins. There's been a lot of uncertified string videos floating around. Everybody's mad about them, but I have actual certified string footage that Casey's put up on his channel, and he's going to let me play it on my channel and talk about it. So we're going to do that next for those of you that are live. If you're watching this as a video later, that video will also be up in my live tab for you to check out. Anyhow, we'll get to these last 4 balls and then we'll get out of here. Yeah, TNT is looking fever pitch bad right now. Actually, the fever pitch is worse. Like, I would rather throw a TNT than a fever pitch. I might have to do one of those would you rather. That would be a fun video to do. Would you rather throw this ball or eat a pickle or drink pickle juice or something like that? Oh, James, I missed this. But yeah, petition for the TNT to get its own dumpster tier category. Yes, I can't actually do that right now, but it should, because StormB28 suggested that. But yeah, on future lists, the TNT will get. I will make it. I will just call it TNT and put it. Or actually, no, that's what it needs. That's what we need to do. Is for my next list. The next time I need to do this, I'll do the S, A, B, C, D, and then the bottom tier will be TNT. That will be good. Thanks, James. By the way. Refresh my memory. What do the tier letters represent? It's kind of like grades, A, B, C, D. So it's like you get an A in school, but S tier, I don't know where the S, the superior, I think, is where that came from. I don't know why S became the top tier in stuff now, but it's a thing. So S tier is like superior performance, I guess, or it's like an A plus or whatever. I don't know. S tier is the highest, D tier is the worst. All right, yep. Matt wants me to get to the exponent rating, and since he sent me some dollars, the exponent is going to go in A tier, and I think I'm going to put it right behind the TNT infused, because the exponent is like a little bit better hype solid. It's a little, the hype solid is like a longer, sharper IQ tour. The exponent is like an IQ with more differential, so it flares a little bit more. So it's like it might even be close, but it's not quite as versatile as the Tour Dynamics. The little bit of asymmetry gives the Tour Dynamics the edge, I think, over the exponent generally. Now on house shots, the exponent is just an IQ that flares more, so it's more usable. It's more in play. The exponent is one of these that it's strong enough to be in play. It's controllable enough to, it just clicks on all the right, it checks all the right boxes. It just checks all the right boxes. That's the best way to put it. Because it's medium strength, it's medium response, it's medium length. It's just absolutely the most medium ball that you could probably come up with. With surface, it's strong enough to be on play on a lot of things. With shine, it's weak enough to play on pretty dry lanes. It's not necessarily directional. It's a little bit more naturally continuous, but it's not necessarily like IQ continuous, but it's not like duo directional. It's somewhere in between there. It's got a really nice reaction shape. It's just really good. I think it needs to have a little bit of surface on it, because with shine, it can get a little squirty, but again, we have heavier, longer lead conditions than most people do. Angel's had it out a few times, but she generally likes chuggier, more tumbly stuff. She likes balls that want to slow down look better for her, and the exponent doesn't necessarily slow down, so it can be a little long and weakish on occasion, but the exponent looks really good. Off topic, what's the link to your puppy auction thingy? Yeah, that's on the free side of Discord too, so you don't even have to sign up for the membership. We've got a Balls for Doggos channel in our Discord to check that out, and I think we're actually gonna have a stream about that later tonight too. I'm just stream day. Certified strings are fine. They are kind of fine, and there's a lot of stuff to talk about. So yes, there should be a TNT tier. I meant the exponent's not quite S tier, because I think it's just a little bit too weak for everybody to use on everything. But it's definitely very high A tier. I would, again, and this is kind of funny that the 3 balls that I would probably recommend that I think are the most generally usable, Summit, TNT Infused, and Exponent, or not in S tier, but it just, there's little things about each one of them that kind of keep them out of the S tier. Yes, follow up. Found your video on the hustles. Think the M&M will be in my bag soon. Yeah, the M&M really good. Yes. TNT S tier originates from Japanese-made video games and culture in general. I do remember this because in Mega Man X4, Cyber Peacock stage, you had the S. There were several different challenges. You had to get through certain parts of the stage in a certain amount of time, and S was the best. So yeah, S superb, solid, blah blah. So yeah. Throw the TNT for a league set, or bowling off the wrong foot for a whole league set. Someone should start and organize a collection. Start an organization that collects donated TNT balls and build a monument out of them. Yeah. All right. We have three more balls to rank in 7 minutes, and I need to get out of here because we got string pins to talk about. That's going to be all kinds of fun. Zen Gold Label, I'd been all over the place with. At first, it was just a god ball, and then as it's gotten a little bit of use on it, it's kind of like a smoother virtual energy blackout. So it's a little hard to place. I think it kind of, again, I'm just going to keep walking these down here. I think it goes under the X plane. It's still a very good ball in A tier. I just don't use it a whole lot. It probably should even go, I don't know. Yeah, I keep walking. I have no idea where to put this ball. I really don't. I think that's probably where I should put it. It's a lot like a stronger Revenant. So that's probably where it should go. I think that the IQ Ruby is a little bit more generally usable. The Gold Label, again, it's REX Pearl, and some people just don't get along with, I know it's Reserve Blend 801. It's REX Pearl. Some people don't get along with that cover, and it's a little hard to read. It's just a little hard to read. So I think that it could be up there above the TNT infused. Actually, it might even be a little bit better because it's clean and sharp like that, but it is heavy rolling. It's controllable. It's got a little bit more traction. It's not forward like the infused can be, but it's just a little wonky sometimes. Like sometimes I'll pull it out and it'll look amazing, and sometimes it'll just wiggle and never do anything. So it's just, yeah. Yeah, like James said, it's low mid A. It's okay, but it's not like, it's just, I don't know. So it just kind of there. Like it's on the short list for me to take, but it never makes it out of the bag. And when it does make it out of the bag, it's not great, but it's not bad. It's just meh. REX is my kryptonite. All right, 2 more balls. I think this one, sorry, it has to go. This is a history pick. It has to go first in S tier because the Zen is the craziest selling ball. Even though I had a couple of them and didn't match up with either of them, it is just it was the Summit before the Summit, basically. I really think that the Summit's kind of just a stronger, better Zen, really. And so time, again, the Summit's only where it's at because of time. It's been out for 5 months. I can't, in good conscience, I don't want to get recency biased. The Zen is just, even if you didn't like the Zen, this is just really not debatable because this put Global on the map. It single-handedly backed up Storm's entire production line for almost a year because of how popular it was. And we're talking, it got released in December 19, or maybe it was December 20 something. It was COVID. It was a COVID ball of some sort. I think it was December of 20. It wasn't a December 19 ball. It was December of 20. And it just, again, we're in COVID. Some places are still closed down. Some places are still heavily restricted. And it just sold so much. And it looks so good for so many people. It's just ridiculous. Yeah, November 2020. Okay, so it was kind of a COVID ball. And they just had no idea that this thing was going to take off with. The look is sharp. The name is sharp. All the marketing points on this is sharp. And it just seemed to do all the right things for everybody. It's just the perfect strength for the vast majority of league conditions. It would hold on misses. It was smooth enough to hold on misses in, but strong and sharp enough to get back from misses out. Again, it was, I think the Summit's a better version of the Zen, but the Zen was definitely one of the premier solid stepping stones. Just ridiculous. So if I throw the Zen, you wouldn't recommend the ZGL. Actually, the ZGL doesn't act like the Zen much at all, because the Zen's kind of forward. The ZGL is longer, sharper, and rounder. They just don't really act very similar. Another one, because I got to get out of here. Sorry, I won't have time to do the requests. I should have allowed more time, but I'm gonna put this. Yeah, that's going up there. The blackout is stupid. Dumb, stupid, nuts, ridiculous. This is another one that's kind of weird. It's like an asymmetric gold label, but the asymmetry is what I think really makes this work. It's longer and sharper. That it's an infinite physics or a dark code on paper, but it's longer and sharper. So the things with the infinite and the dark, it doesn't have the negatives from those balls, but the positives. The torque lifts it above something like a gold label, which can be wiggly and iffy. And we haven't had a whole lot of time with the blackout either. It came out around the same time as the Summit, but it's just nasty. Mine gets out occasionally, but my head still hasn't accepted that it loses the edge a little bit as you use it. Mine has gotten a little bit weaker, a little bit smoother, which actually makes it significantly more usable for me. But I'm still expecting it to go sideways. So my head just you have to throw it left. You got to get it out there. And so I nearly throw it in the ditch most of the time when I try to use it. But as soon as my brain accepts, it's like, okay, well, this is a little bit more controllable than it seems like. This ball can be controlled. I've seen everybody throw this ball, from big rev rates to straight. The guy that we bowled the last couple of weeks in our Friday night league puts one right down the side. Looks ridiculous for him. I've seen other people go coast to coast with it. It's one of those that does just about everything that you could possibly want a ball to do right. It's strong enough to play on heavier conditions. It's clean enough to be used on drier conditions. Straighter, lower rev rates can use it because it gives them length, but it also gives them pop, so it doesn't require them to open up their angles. This other guy he kind of puts it down the side. He just gives it the little suitcase down the side, and it doesn't make him move left. It's responsive enough that it gives him a bunch of punch and power at the pocket, but it doesn't force him inside because it won't get down the lane. Higher rev rates can bang on it and they can play third, fourth arrow and bang on it because it's just going to go 40 feet before it thinks about doing anything. And then it turns over sharp, but it's also really round. I think it works good on the left side of the lane too. It goes well with surface. It goes well with it's just an amazing, amazing ball. So is the Vibo pretty much SPI's version of the Black Widow 2.0? Kind of. It's just a little bit rounder, but yes, that's a very good comparison. It's got a slightly different reaction shape. The 2.0 is a little bit more forward. This one's a little bit rounder, but yes, very, very similar. Yeah, Dark Code and ZGL were unusable for me. That makes me question the Vibo. And I would think if you don't get along with REX, you may not get along with this one, but this one is better than the Dark Code and the ZGL. So if I really like my Infinite, would the Vibo be comparable? Not really. The blackout is longer and sharper, kind of different shape from the Infinite. Yeah, it is time for the next stream, so I've got to get out of here. One last question. Create a 3-ball league arsenal from this list. So 3-ball league arsenal, even though I just gushed for the blackout. Well, no, actually, I would probably go blackout, Summit, IQ Ruby. Or blackout, Summit, absolute. If you don't want that, if you want kind of more step downs, the Summit's actually stronger than the blackout. So I would go Summit, blackout, Ruby. Those would be my 3. So anyway, thanks everybody for watching. This was fun. I should have given a little bit more time, but I have a lot of stuff to do. I'd be streaming for like 5 solid hours today. So it's on to the string pin video. I've got to get out of here. Thanks everybody for watching. This was awesome. Pieces.